Matthew Lyons was charged and arrested.
Jacob, you can sit. Sorry. Yeah, that's fine.
Restart the timer.
You may start. You may restart the timer. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, guys. I apologize, Jacob. It is setting this small. And it's setting this small standing kid. It's not. Sitting is fine. I apologize. Okay. Okay. All right. Go for it.
Matthew Lyon was charged and arrested under the Sedition Act for the crime of criticizing our president in the press. For this crime, he was sentenced to 4 months in prison and charged a $1,000 fine, the equivalent of more than 2 years of salary for a skilled laborer. The First Amendment of the Constitution says that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. James Madison, author of the Bill of Rights, has further elaborated on this freedom of speech, saying that includes, quote, the right of freely examining public characters and measures. According to the First Amendment of the Constitution, the Sedition Act is clearly unconstitutional. This law makes
no. You can just jump in.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you're saying that the freedom of speech says that you can't make anything abridging, like freedom of speech at all, but clearly in the past we have said that there's certain things that you can't say for the protection of our society. So what do you think of that?
In the context of this case, what he did was criticize the President of the United States, and there has been no law under the U.S. There are laws in the UK protecting the king from criticism, but in the U.S. there is no precedent for making laws prohibiting people from criticizing our president. This law makes it...
Do you think that the intent of the publication was to defame the president or to bring the president into contempt?
Matthew Lyon admitted in the court that this was done with ill intent towards the president.
Okay, which would cause internal instability.
No.
Right? If the people of the United States were not in contempt of the president?
Isn't it essential to having a vibrant democracy that people freely express?
Would you also agree that it was a time of crisis? Of external crisis? World crisis, it's war with France?
It is true that there may be measures necessary to take during wartime, but this is not wartime. The U.S. government has passed no declaration of war, and if they wish to exercise wartime powers, they should start by declaring war, not by violating First Amendment rights.
But you could still consider it a time of crisis, because there's such a new fragile government.
Perhaps it's a time of crisis, but once again, we have a mechanism for recognizing times of crises like that. If there is a military threat, a la France, we can declare war, which allows the U.S. government to take expanded powers, like suspending habeas corpus. But we have taken no such steps. Instead, we have protected the president's personal confidence.
But it's such a, declaring war is like such a big step. It's like such a complicated time with England is taking United States ships, France is taking United States ships. It's obviously a time of crisis, even though we're not in a declared war, right? Would you agree that it's a time of crisis?
There is constantly crisis, and while I suspect that there are merits that might distinguish this from other times, we should not be establishing the precedent that during peacetime you can violate the Constitution, when clearly the Constitution recognizes there are times of crisis and gives us a mechanism to address those, namely a declaration of war.
Do you think that line published anything false in his statement?
The court found that he was lying. However, part of this is following the English precedent of having the truth as a defense, which is not what America has observed as the only way of defending you. And furthermore, these are subjective opinions. Thinking that
the Sedition Act itself literally says any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against.
Yes, the Sedition Act uses only the truth as your defense. So if the court thinks it is not true, then it is false. Yet even the judge in this case was the witness called to argue it. And the judge, the accusation was Adams is a pompous person who has pompous celebrations, and the judge had attended one of those celebrations. Yet the judge refused to testify. So when the law is enforced by the same Federalist political figures who wrote it, then it is difficult to imagine that in effect it will allow for the truth to be addressed.
Guys, there's some whispering. It's kind of annoying. So.
Do you think that publishing something false in a newspaper hurts your country more than it could ever protect the Constitution if we allow it to happen?
Publishing falsities, political discourse, even including expanding outside the realm of necessarily polite political discourse, is still healthy. As long as there were no active threats called, as long as the government was not actively called into be seen as completely unfit or seen as sort of, as long as there was no active action taken against the government, all he did was criticize Adams as a person. The president is not the government. We came from a feudalist system, and America is meant to be different. We were founded on different ideals, and now that we have this document that backs up certain rights and freedoms that we are now almost instantly abridging with the power and giving one man the power to not be criticized.
But what happens to our government once our citizens think false things that aren't true about the Constitution or about the United States?
Isn't it a greater threat to our republic if the president was in fact a bully or pompous or foolish or selfish? And what other mechanism do we have to establish whether those things are true, except public discourse and letting people freely share their sincerely held beliefs?
So checks and balances in the government.
Yes, so like Congress people, like Matthew Lyon, can vote on their sincerely held beliefs, and they can convince people to vote. In fact, it's inconceivable that this is inciting violence because you think the president isn't a nice guy. But what it can incite is people to vote and to exercise.
Literally did incite violence.
No.
So you don't hit on the stick.
There was a federal, that's a different case. That's not what it's being arrested for.
But it's
He got it, no, it's not under this law.
I just want to be clear, do you think that there needs to be a declaration of war in order for something to be defined as a crisis? Because like, just reading the history of it, it seems like the United States is in crisis, and perhaps declaring war would put the United States into even more crisis. So I think that there's enough going on to qualify as a crisis, but like, would you say that there needs to be a declaration of war in order for these things to be suspended, such as like the writ of habeas corpus, as you mentioned?
I don't think that the American citizenry sincerely believes this is a time of crisis, considering the results of the elections of 1798. Clearly, candidates who were saying that France is providing an imminent threat to the United States lost more races than they won relative to the prior years. So considering that the Federalists arguing that we're facing imminent threat have a eroding political base, might explain A, why they're trying to censor criticism of them, but also implies that the American citizens don't feel this threat of crisis you're talking about. And once again, if there is a crisis, a military threat to the United States, what act would better prepare the US to defend itself than a declaration of war? And how would the US be strengthened if we establish the precedent that in times of peace, you can simply disregard the Constitution?
You can, if they're done and you have made your argument, you can yield your time and take the rest of it after the other time the other side is done.
So can we yield our time and have 2.5 minutes after them?
If the justices are good with that, yeah, you can do that too.
Can that happen in real life?
That happens in real life.
So why wouldn't you yield all your time to go after the other one?
Yeah, is it better to go
Because the justices won't allow it until they feel that they've gotten enough out of the first argument. So it's up to the justices to allow it to happen. So how much time is reserved?
2:30.
2:30. Great. Okay.
Wait, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
No one in the Sedition Act or the First Amendment doesn't say anything about the First Amendment giving the government its power. About the declaration of war. Sorry, said that wrong. Nowhere does it say that a crisis elicits a different situation.
Okay. So why are you asking me? That should be a discussion you have in your hearing. That's a great.
I mean, I'm not involved.
In the next hearing, when you're up. Yeah.
You're up.
When you are up. Respondents. Jacob, sit. Thank you. We need to keep this moving, so because we have a limited amount of time. Is there a reason that are we ready to go? Respondents.
What?
Are you guys ready? Okay. Justices, you guys ready? Yeah, Alana, 10 on the clock. Great. Go.
Just sit
Yeah.
down. Sorry. It's an honest mistake. You can restart your time if you'd like, sir.
You can start.
Justices, we would all agree that the Constitution is in place to protect the rights of citizens and to uphold the values of the United States. False claims are not a positive contribution to the public because these claims instill false information in the public discourse which should not be relevant in our political discussions. Mr. Lyon's claims are rooted in ideas which simply have no basis in truth.
However, we must also look at the effects of this potential ruling. Our nation is new and understandably relatively weak in comparison to the nations that have been around for a long time. We need to establish our country before establishing the principles of it. It is likely that with the termination of this law, the United States would fall into a state of deep turmoil as supporters of the revolution would be free to revolt constantly. We do not have the power.
What revolution?
They would be supporting revolution in France and thereby causing turmoil in the United States.
Explain that, please.
Explain what?
How them supporting revolution in France.
For example, these types of claims that Matthew Lyon made will just be expanded into not just claims but also action, which would result in turmoil in the United States.
But where did you get that information from? Like, you're so sure that if someone starts saying bad things about the president, that all of a sudden everyone's gonna start like killing each other. Like, what makes you say that?
I'm not saying just about the president, but I'm just saying that we have these laws in place for a reason. Our country is not strong enough, and we simply don't have the power to like stand up against revolution against our own country yet.
But as you mentioned, it's a new country. We haven't tested what it's like before. Like, this is what we're trying.
Are we willing to take such a serious risk as allowing our people to speak
Maybe
in
this
any
is the
way
risk.
against the...
Like, maybe it's the risk to stop freedom of speech.
I understand that you think that right now is protecting the country, but what happens in 100 years from now when this law is still in place because we ruled it so, and the government is in a position where it is strong enough that people can speak out against it?
Yeah, so in 100 years, when we have the, or hopefully less, I mean, I'm confident in our country, when we have the power to actually stand up against revolution, I think that then we'll be able to make decisions based on our principles. Just that right now we don't have that power, and our country is not ready to face the type of potential revolution that could result from a ruling.
So
you're
if the
saying
country
we should make
is,
a ruling that we should just make to overturn later?
and if the country isn't strong enough at the moment, then wouldn't, like what Jacob was saying, it would make sense that they would declare war or something. But clearly, Congress doesn't believe that there is any type of crisis at the moment because we're like right now, like law, like technically it's a time of peace right now. There isn't technically a crisis going on.
Right, but what we're saying is that if you ruled for the petitioner, then that crisis could ensue. This type of speech will not just be speech, will be expanded into action.
But if someone fights the police or something, that is obviously a problem. But if they're speaking out against a government official,
Right, but making this decision will give people the opportunity to expand it outside of just discourse. It will turn into revolution and active revolution.
But what if our citizens actually have good things? What if our citizens
we have to keep the government honest.
malicious
Well,
attacks on
it
the
is
government can
protected.
actually be are actually effective and can help us make laws and policies that we would have thought about?
Well, the Sedition Act clearly states that two things that are required, which is malicious intent, which the petitioner admitted and agreed to that, which was an aspect of Matthew Lyon's statement in a publication in the newspaper, and then also that Matthew Lyon wouldn't be in jail if these statements held to be true and that they were legitimate claims about our president, but saying that this man has unbounded thirst for ridiculous pomp or selfish avarice are not true, and that's the reason why he's in jail. In no way are we suggesting.
Except
Like,
what
there
if
isn't a clear line of what's like true and what's false. It's like by saying that like bad things about the president, that isn't saying, oh, the president did so and so. It's saying bad things about the president. So it's kind of like blurring the line between what's objectively truth and what's objectively false, and that's like a dangerous place to be.
If Matthew Lyon had said that John Adams was had ridiculous pomp or selfish avarice, and then said why and explained those examples, this may be a different case, but that's not
what if someone is scared to speak out against the president because something they know is true, but they're afraid that in court it might not hold up and then they'll get thrown in jail?
Well, this is an issue of distrust. That's a completely different argument. That's not saying someone should be scared to speak the truth because they're not putting trust in our court system. That's a completely separate argument. What we're arguing is that statements that hold malicious intent and are objectively proven to be false don't have a place in our government. If someone were to say John Adams eats oatmeal every morning, and that would have some profound effect on his image in the country, and you could bring the facts to court or whatever and say why this is true and why his consuming of oatmeal is ultimately going to have a negative impact in the United States world standing, then absolutely we encourage that. The respondents are pro that for political discourse. But saying your president has an unbounded thirst for ridiculous pomp, which is no basis in fact, and is in fact the reason why he's currently in jail. We don't think that's a reasonable conclusion.
Are you telling us that in order to uphold our democracy, we have to go against the more democratic values?
Absolutely. The democracy is in place, and as we said, we agree with it. The Constitution is in place to protect the rights and citizens and to uphold the values of the United States. If we're going to put our country at risk, which is, we really argue this fragile state that the United States is currently in, especially relative to other world powers. For example, the British Navy has taken United States ships. We must protect our country. We must protect our country in order that we can have these laws that protect our citizens. Because if we don't have a country, there's no point in having any laws.
Do you think that citizens respect their country more when the country gives them rights?
Yes, I think that may be true, but there's too much internal instability right now.
Well, isn't there
As
gonna
you
be
said,
more?
for us to be worried about our
instability.
If what?
You're saying that people can't talk. They're gonna be.
We're not saying.
Would you classify this as a time of crisis? Explain why this is a time of crisis.
This is a time of crisis because there are many people in our country who feel the same way that Matthew Lyon does. And yes, in an ideal situation.
So that means that there's going to be a revolution or something?
Yes, in the United States.
Silencing those people
that's
cause
possible.
war revolution then?
No, because these people are ready to fight, and by overturning this law, we're giving them the chance to do so. And I think that people should be able to speak their mind. There's just too much pent-up frustration right now in our population and too much instability for us to be able to just let them reign free.
Also, I think that just because we're not in a declaration of war doesn't mean we're in a time of crisis. I mean, we saw Washington's decision in 1793 to not involve ourselves or commit to the side of the British or French, and then in 1794 sending John Jay to England to deal with this rising tension. So I absolutely think there's this tension, a palpable tension that we must address, and if we don't deal with it and find a way to protect our country and protect our government, then we're just not going to have one.
Just to clarify.
If there was all this tension, then why wouldn't the president declare war?
Look,
Well, I think that question is.
Let him answer. It's got like a minute.
Sorry, can you repeat your question? One more time?
If this time is so full of crisis, why didn't the president declare war?
because declaring war, what do you mean, like a declaration of war
Like
on
the actual
the
crisis
Congress?
itself?
Yes.
Doesn't Congress have to do that?
Yes.
Yeah, Congress has to do that, no.
Well, the president was going to bring this speech to Congress asking them to declare war, but he chose not to do it. Why did he choose not to do it? If this time is so full of crisis, wouldn't he have chosen to make that speech and to ask Congress to declare war?
But a declaration of war would just would escalate the situation to a place where even just declaring war would escalate it, and the citizens in our country would then have a greater level of fear, and it would incite more passionate views that there's not room for in our country right now.
Are you arguing, I have a clarifying question.
For the actions that would
Are
be
you
followed
arguing
by
that
the
the
views.
Sedition Act is constitutional, or are you arguing that we need to redefine times of crisis?
We're not arguing that we need to redefine times of crisis. The respondents believe that the Sedition Act is completely constitutional and actually a necessity for our country's safety and future. Additionally, that Matthew Lyon broke the law, and that, yes, declaration of war may be the most extreme, as the Justice stated, but that this is the most extreme means of declaring a state of crisis, but we think it's rather foolish to confine any form of crisis to just this one declaration.
If the First Amendment clearly protects the freedom of press, then how is it constitutional?
Yeah, you said it's clearly constitutional. I think that what Rachel's going at, what I agree with, is that it's not constitutional. What we're arguing right now is whether or not we should keep this law, but it's objectively not constitutional. This is not freedom of speech if you are literally making it illegal to speak certain things.
We can't keep the law because of the effect that it will have. There's simply there's a large chance that we won't have a country if we overturn this law, and then furthermore, this is the same type of situation that we faced in our country just a few years ago when Hamilton and Jefferson were sitting around the table talking about whether to go into France.
We have these values.
It's
Let me finish what I'm gonna say.
Is that time? Yeah, that's it, guys. Rule is 10.
Come on, the Supreme
10
Court must
minutes.
change this.
No, that is how it goes. 10 minutes, done. 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30 left for respondents, petitioners rather. Shh, guys, please stop talking. We're wasting time for the next hearing. I want to have a complete hearing for the next guys.
Can we start for the next?
As soon as so we have respondents at 2:30 left.
Yeah.
Alana?
Yeah, I said it.
Great. Wait. Shh, wait, we're gonna wait until it's totally quiet. Okay, respondents, go.
Wait. So do you believe that like anything can be said no matter how false or no matter how maliciously the intent is? Like for example, would it be okay for the Secretary of State to just come out and accuse the president of treason, and that would basically tear down the democracy, or that would just create a huge crisis. Do you think that's okay?
That is clearly not the case. That is.
No, but that could happen.
That is what's covered by the Sedition Act.
And the Sedition Act isn't going against that, but you guys are saying that it shouldn't be a law, and
there's a big difference between accusing someone of treason and bringing
But that's the extreme of what could happen, and they could legally nothing would happen to them. So there's nothing stopping
We're
them.
not arguing any possible merit of the act. We're arguing whether it violated the Constitution here. Any part of it that violates the Constitution is violating the Constitution.
But maybe benefiting the security of the country.
Do you think
Can
it's
you
worth?
respond to the claim that declaring war would escalate crisis, and that the Sedition Act is a good way to bring down levels of crisis instead of bringing it? But I mean, we agreed that if there is war, then the Sedition Act is okay for the country to defend itself. But what these gentlemen argued is that the Sedition Act is okay even when there's lesser times of crisis to de-escalate that crisis, so we do not need to declare war. Can you respond to that, please?
So, in terms of the current situation going on in international politics, our sailors are being captured along with thousands of sailors being impressed into foreign militaries and foreign navies. And that is a horrible process. We're losing a ton of money on trade, we're losing money on ships, we're losing money on a lot of issues. And declaring war, while it may escalate the situation, may be necessary. If you want to put in place such an act that...
Please stop whispering, people.
If you want to put in place such an act that would abridge the freedom of speech, it is necessary for a true crisis to be reached, and there is a true crisis to be reached, but it cannot be fully recognized. It needs to be more explicit than just stating that there is a crisis.
Also, I think we need to understand why we fought the revolution in the first place. When we fought the revolution against the most powerful empire in the world, we gave up the protection of the most powerful navy in the world and risked our ships to be attacked by piracy or foreign nations. But why we fought that war and why we gave up that protection was to safeguard and protect the liberties that are established and enshrined in this Constitution. We shouldn't be so quick to give those up.
But we're not gonna have
Okay, that's it.
Good speech.
That's excellent.
Okay. All right. Well done. Hearing number 2. What? You have 20 minutes. So exactly 20 minutes, so get up there. Guys, we have exactly 20 minutes, so we need to get this thing started now, please.
It's also because this law is not a thing that exists anymore, and you can be agree that.
Okay, let's go. Come on, faster.
I have more questions.
Well, you should, and that's why you're going to have a chance to listen to the next hearing and see if they're answered. And if they're not, then you can bring them up at your conference.
The exact opposite of what I remember when I argued in the Hamilton-Jefferson debate.
I remember that, and I was thinking that when you said that, specifically sitting around a table. Yes, I thought that was terrific. Okay. Sydney, do you have a timing device that you can easily access? Thank you. Set that to 10 minutes, please. Thank you. All right. All right. We are ready to begin. Please stop talking. Thank you. Guys. Thank you for a relatively fast transition. Sydney, you have 10 minutes ready? Set on the clock? Petitioners, are you ready? Justices, are you ready? Start the timer.
Go. In an extremely close vote, Congress passed the Sedition Act in 1798. Our client, David Brown, erected a liberty pole, a form of protest known to be used during the Revolutionary War. In fact, famed Federalist Alexander Hamilton was a big fan of this way of protesting the English. Brown was then convicted in what was clearly a sham trial. The judge was a famous Federalist. We believe that our client should not be found guilty in angry rant in support of one's own political party and in opposition to specific government actions with no intention or specificity of danger should be accepted as legitimate dissent in any democracy. Should venting in a public forum about how one dislikes the government or some of their policies be forbidden, this seems nothing short of tyranny. While some have argued that the MAH00080, or no previous restraint legal understanding of free speech, allows for the Sedition Act, this is clearly not the case. To begin with, we are in America, not England, so we should refer to what is made clearly explicit in the Constitution rather than relying on common law from England. Additionally, this no previous restraint argument definitely, yes.
But don't we, in cases where we don't have any context from American previous law, it is a tradition to go back to.
Well, we do have context from American law, because in the First Amendment it clearly states that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of free speech. That means abridging, that means curtailing at all. That means that you can't stop, you can't put any sort of restraints on the free speech.
So you don't believe in curtailing free speech at all in the slightest, in no cases whatsoever?
I don't think that you can.
I also think that we're talking about this
Amendment case.
What about in cases of calling for threatening another person or calling for the death of another person?
I think if we're going to be very literalist on the First Amendment, then you could say that abridging means that you cannot do anything.
So you believe that?
It also states in the Liberty Poll that our client put up that there was no violent actions. The Liberty Poll states no Stamp Act, no sedition, no alien bill, no land tax, downfall to the tyrants of America, peace and retirement to the president, long live the vice president and the minority. So here there's no action. There's no action that he's asking for, and he's not ensuing violence. He's just stating he's basically faced with
the phrase downfall to the tyrants of America. In the global context of today's world, you don't think that has any relation to violence. Given all the news about what's happening in France, downfall to the tyrants of America, I think could definitely be considered inciting violence.
I don't think it is not precise, and there is no clear and present danger to any party which is mentioned specifically, so I think it is too much of a broad.
There's a difference
even if there's no actual action being incited, it's the same spirit, and it's defamation. You're trying to incite the spirit against the person, even if you're not saying we are going to kill the president.
But spirit is different than actual violence, and people should be allowed to feel and write and believe what they want about this government if they disagree with it, even without doing.
But the argument you just made about downfall was essentially that vagueness makes it permissible.
Even if it doesn't intentionally say that there has to be violence, if it insinuates that violence is a feasible means of achieving that downfall, isn't it inciting violence?
Okay, so to start off with Ligor's question. So what you were asking was that, sorry, I just want to make sure I want to stay on the right page, was that you're saying that according to the Sedition Act, they're giving more of a broader scope for it. And Ben, you're saying that our argument was that a broader scope makes it okay?
I'm clarifying. Is your argument that a broader scope, which I'm just interpreting to mean it's more vague, makes it permissible? Is that the same thing, like vagueness?
So okay, I am saying that if it is vague and broad, then it should be. I'm saying that I really do firmly believe that based on the Constitution and what's written, everything should be permissible, whatever time. But as we're retracting and going into more things, I think that certainly if it's vague, then it should be allowed. And so as to what Ligor was saying about it being, if it is, if it's specifically inciting, or rather being in the spirit, so there definitely isn't something which is specifically inciting. It is broad, and in general, you can't abridge.
But go ahead.
Okay. If you are suggesting, though, that the First Amendment should be taken completely literally and in its fullest scope, then why aren't you also taking these words to be completely literal as downfall and as not vague, as benign as you want it to be, but to the furthest degree?
Okay, so taking it completely literally, peace and retirement to the president, that is wishing the president well, that is not against any office of the government, therefore it does not comply with the Sedition.
What about
do not people that don't understand
who are the tyrants? Who are the tyrants of America? who it's vague, it's
But
not
just because
clearly
you're
saying
saying
it.
because it's vague, it can't be accused of inciting violence, right?
Yes.
But it will, I think, given political context of America right now, saying downfall to the tyrants of America incites violence in half of America, which is part of a political party which is on the verge of revolution against the government.
But I think it is also important that, like, context and what he actually wanted. Like, even he wanted to put this.
This
up
is
as-
erected in the town square. Nobody who sees it knows his context of writing it. All they see are the words on it.
Well, they see that he wants specific policy. He wants to be able to express his thoughts freely, which is clear because he lists a bunch of things that he wants to be repealed. But what you're saying is, I think what Rena was saying about bringing the context of what he's exactly saying, being more of like concrete bills that he wants to take away, is important to keep in mind. Also, I think that if it doesn't say we are going to congregate on the town square to kill the president and something, and I think that
Would
we're
you say
far
that
enough
that
to-
is allowed?
I'd say as long as that.
I think that would be a different. I think that
Any
is
free
free speech.
speech,
I
yeah.
agree, but I'm saying that would be something that's a little
You are-
more. That's a different.
Right now, what you are doing is you're arguing that the vagueness is what's protecting your client, and yet you all, the vagueness, does that mean though that active threatening would be a different case, and that active threatening, even though it is still free speech, active threatening is not okay?
I don't I think that's a different category, and we should
But then
be
you're
treating it
saying
as
it's a different category is my question. Why are you saying it's a different category if you believe that all free speech should be allowed?
Even within the being able to say things like, we're talking about this one specific case, and I think that there are gradations within being allowed to have free speech, even if it's unlimited, there's still gradations.
I think the free speech, in that case, it's not just free speech. If it's saying we're going to congregate at 2 p.m. in front of the president's office to kill him, it's actually like essentially an action in and of itself.
But the specificity itself is not what is endangering the peace. It's simply the message it's sending, right? So downfall to the tyrants of America, you're saying isn't specific enough to convict somebody of sedition for. But it will incite the same violence as saying, like, the president should be murdered should.
I don't think you can say that. I don't think you can say that, saying that I don't like the people who are in charge. And I think downfall to the tyrants of America, if there was a specific, if you could gather numerous, I think maybe in the context of an American Revolution. No, it's not. I don't think downfall to the tyrants of America, it's the same thing as saying something like, not my president, or down to a terrible president.
Does downfall not have any violent connotation? The word downfall. No violent connotation.
But do you think it would incite any sort of
violence?
violence?
That's not his.
It doesn't matter what his intention is.
Well, the question is,
I
the
think it
Sedition Act
definitely does.
is claiming that any inciting of violence is the problem. So even if it's not their intention, even if it's not specific wording, do you think this would incite violence?
I don't think it actually, no, I think it wouldn't incite violence. Exactly, it would not incite violence.
Okay, explain why it wouldn't.
Because I think he's clearly saying that I am fed up with what is going on. Ideally I would
think that half
like.
of the country that's on the brink of revolt will
But
interpret
it's
downfall
not-
to the tyrants of America as, oh, let's peacefully.
Yeah, but I don't actually think they're that much on the brink of revolt as currently. It's not like you were seeing at France with a huge march on Versailles. I don't think you can make kind of the same parallels to what was going on there. There are not these mass protests. For sure, there are some people in power.
What preceded a march, the storming of the Bastille or whatever.
Well, I mean, we're not seeing any of that now, so I think it's hard to make
But
that.
rhetoric preceded action, right? And here we have rhetoric, and should we act preemptively?
So I don't think you can act preemptively. I think that you have to have something that's actually going on currently, and I think that since there isn't marching on the Bastille because there aren't these things, and I think that those words that you're talking about did come in conjunction
We also
with.
just fought like a war to be independent. We're not another country. We can't necessarily compare what's going on in France.
Oh, great, cut. Okay, 10 minutes on the clock. Respondents, are you ready to go? Okay, wait. Sydney, you ready to go? Justice, wait, Justice is not ready. Justices, you'll have a chance to conference after this is done.
It's not about the case, we're talking about speaking over each other.
Oh, much better. This is the first time in my career that somebody defended themselves by saying we're not talking about the class. Yes. Oh, there was. Yes.
Okay, we're not here to talk about permanent measures to abridge freedom of speech. We are here to talk about just for the next 2 years until 1801, we need to have the Sedition Act to protect the United States from a revolution that's violent, with thousands of people getting guillotined. We do not want that in this country just yet because we are so new.
Wait, where?
Wait,
How imminent?
In France, there have been.
Why is France the same as here?
What?
Why is France the same as here?
Because even though currently, the French Revolution was kind of, they got the idea from the American Revolution, but they have very much taken it out of hand, and they have been guillotining people in the most violent ways. Thousands of people, they've been killing nuns, and just for their religious practices. And I think that it is something that is a potential of them bringing it to us, because a few years ago, when Genet came to visit, he did not follow any of our rules for neutrality, and there were parades for him, and he even enlisted some American volunteers to get involved in the war on American soil against English allies.
Why? Go.
If you're saying that there needs to be a time limit, and you're putting a time limit of 2 years, how can you choose a time limit if you don't know when this is going to end?
That's in the law, but it expires.
No, but
It's part of the.
I know, but I'm not.
I'm sorry.
If it's the conditions could change in less than that, and if we're relying on the fact that this is a temporary law and it's only in war times or times like these, then there needs to be a specific outline of how it's applied, not just this general time frame, because things could change in 1 year, and if we still have this law, then it might make it worse, and then by 2 years we can't change it, and the government is saying that we have to keep having this law.
And why should it matter that if it is a violation of the Constitution about rights, why should it matter that it's only for a short period of time? Isn't it still a violation? Sorry.
That's kind of two very different questions. I'll try to answer both. But I do not think that it is a violation of the Constitution because there is the interest of national security, which has also been addressed in the Constitution in Article 3, Section 3, I believe, where they talk about treason. And we're not allowed to provide comfort or aid to the enemy or to American enemies. And while this is not the same thing as that, there are laws that go as far as inflicting capital punishment for going against national security. So that is an American interest. And during this time of crisis, I think it's very important that we ensure that people are not.
Article 3, Section 3 is about someone who goes to war against the United States.
And that's also giving them
or comforts an enemy.
Giving aid and comfort to an enemy.
Is that what you're saying this classifies?
But what sort of enemy? Are we talking about another country, or are we talking about another political enemy of the president?
This would be another country.
Okay, but what about, let's talk about a political enemy for a second. If the Sedition Act is going to suggest that someone who is a political enemy or rival of the president, who is not allied with France, just criticizing the president, if they say this is not okay, the president should stop this, will the Sedition Act be in effect for that?
If they're doing it based on truth and based on facts, the president is doing
Based
this
on
thing.
opinion.
If they're saying the president is doing this specific thing that is true and is happening, then there's no problem with that. It's just when they say that someone is a tyrant, especially with the implications that Thomas Jefferson made about the tree of liberty being fertilized by the blood of tyrants, there's a certain implication with that.
What is it?
Yeah.
Okay. But is a tyrant a person that is a tyrant a specific fact that someone like is being called a tyrant, or is a tyrant a word choice that's just based on like preference of how to describe someone?
Well, the president and the American government, everyone in the government has to follow certain guidelines from the Constitution and from our rules that do not allow them to become tyrants, or else we would have like another issue. But they have to follow.
So you think that calling someone a tyrant, or not someone, calling as this is described, the President of the United States or either the House of Congress, or the House of Congress, calling a member of the House of Congress or the President a tyrant is automatically sedition?
Well, no, but also the fact that they refer to No Stamp Act, which does not exist in the United States, and it was in 1798, well in this year, it was made more severe in England, and with the implications of the American Revolution, and a large part of that was started because of the Stamp Act, and the fact that then if someone doesn't know that that isn't an American thing, that isn't something that John Adams is doing, and they just see that on a poll, they will think, oh, this is English.
But I'd argue that actually calling someone a tyrant is sedition, but...
Would you consider this to be a false statement?
This, I think that
the text that was on the poll.
Referencing the Stamp Act and referring to tyrants of America as though there are tyrants in America.
But so, in a sense, there's a certain opinion can't be truth or falsity. Like,
unless they're referring to a Stamp Act, it doesn't make sense.
But
But
analogy is opinion. They aren't saying the Stamp Act is the same as that it would be ludicrous.
And even so, if you're talking about the tyrant clause,
There's Stamp Act in the U.S. There is.
Tyrant can be used not as fact but as opinions, describing someone as a tyrant. In fact, the same thing was done as the respondent says. The same thing was done in our revolution with liberty poles. It was used as one of the most common and strongest forms of revolution. People express their ideas that way, and the British took it down, and we called them tyrants, and it was fine then.
If tyranny though is an opinion, as you're suggesting, and you're suggesting that in the context of non-monarchies, it is against the Sedition Act, does that mean that the Sedition Act prevents opinions that contradict it, or opinions that they think are at risk?
Opinions that can be taken to incite violence and that are not based on fact. That are not.
But how can you claim that it's not based on fact?
Just because there's no Stamp Act.
But it doesn't.
No, the tyrant part.
They have to follow the Constitution, so how can they be tyrant?
It doesn't just say
People
violence,
don't always
though,
do what
does
they
it?
are
It
supposed
also
to.
talks about just
People can
general
understand words
unrest,
differently.
correct?
What?
In the Sedition Act, it's not just talking about violence, is it? It's also talking about malicious intent. So what about less violent means? What about speakers or protesters talking about intentions of stopping war, stopping a president, but they are not specifically calling for, oh, I want the president's head on a plate?
I'm not sure this
Oh, okay. Is the Sedition Act going to stop someone or prosecute someone for saying something with an intent of like impeaching the president, even though what they are saying is not violent?
Not necessarily with the intent of impeaching the president, but the intent of impeaching the president while saying things that are not true about the president and trying to spread lies or spread like things that people who do not fact check and do not have access to the resources to fully look into what's going on, but they will see that and they'll just join into this.
So you're saying what makes it true or false is what other people will think of it, not whether it's actually based on fact?
I think it's like the fact that if it's not like I don't know how to explain it, but if it's something that is said, it's like
I understand other people's interpretations make it dangerous, but I don't think it's related to the falsehood of it.
And what about
I think if it isn't fully the truth, what?
Go on.
What about a opinion in favor of the president is not necessarily grounded entirely in truth?
And that would also not be.
So therefore, no opinions can be made, regardless of whether they're for or
Opinions
against.
can be made, we already said that,
But what about
we already,
dangerous opinions?
we already answered your question about,
Okay.
we already answered your question.
Ladies and gentlemen, I need you for 5 more seconds. Shh, guys, shh, that was both, shh,
No opinions.
guys, I need you up here. Justices, you are, justices, shh,
Guys.
justices, you will begin next class with your conference, all of you together. You'll have an opportunity to think through the issues and vote on this. I've emailed you a feedback, guys, I'm not done. I've emailed you a feedback form. I need you guys to thoughtfully complete. It has to do with the quality of the hearing, etc. And I really need to hear your feedback on how you think it went. I will see you guys on Tuesday. Bye. Annie, come here.
you want that by Tuesday, the feedback?